All right, this is session 3 of the Illinois 78 project. Session 2, we covered creation of files, creating a topo file, the optional creation of a terrain file of your own in your design folder. So session 3, it looks like we're going to be starting off with creating a profile. Now we've already created the alignment, and we already said that the profile is not going to be in a separate design file like you're probably used to. It's going to be in the alignment file itself. So let's go to, let's see here.
Yeah, that's the screen right there.
Yeah, we'll go right there. I guess, oh, I got to log back in. Okay, so we're going to go back to ProjectWise, and we're actually going to go back to that alignment design file. And I guess I keep assuming that you guys have all been through the training. How about, like, show of hands, everybody in here, who went through that central office CAD training? Did most everybody or no?
Yeah, pretty much everybody.
Pretty much everybody? Not everybody. Probably like 80% of the people, maybe. Okay, so some of this, you know, is a recap probably of what you already did, but I remember when I first went through my class, I walked away feeling like I knew a little bit about it, but I felt like it was so much information that I'm not sure that I could have repeated it, you know, afterwards. So maybe hearing it a couple times will be useful for you, and you'll see how it's used, you know, for a particular District 6 project. Okay, so here are the steps of creating an existing profile. Later we'll create a proposed profile, but for now we're only doing existing. The way that you do that is that we need to reference in that file that we just created, that terrain file. And so I'll go to my reference dialog there. Let's see, let me delete that. All right, so I'm going to attach the one that we just created. Like, so this is what I did anyway. Throughout the design process, I just used totally my 3D file. Again, at the end, I'll swap it back to surveys. So I'm going to go to the design folder, look for that file that I just created. Let's see. I need to go to the training folder. Design. There it is. Existing terrain. Say OK. All right. Wait, what does that say? Give me one moment here. Okay, so I accidentally referenced it into the wrong file, wrong model, so just hang with me for 1 second. I guess I was sitting in the 3D model. Just bear with me for 1 second while I detach this, and we'll start that process over so we get it right. All right, so when I attached that 3D terrain file to my file, I want to make sure that I'm sitting in the default model. Because as you guys may or may not know, the ones who've been into class would know this, is that the moment that you attach anything that's 3D related to a 2D file, it automatically creates a separate 3D model. And we can see those models in different ways. If you go to your Home tab, I click on this model button right here, and then it shows me that within my design file, I can have multiple other design files, right? You guys, that's just like maybe basic MicroStation stuff, so you might already know that. But this is a model that automatically gets created. Like a 2D model by default is only going to have the default file. It's not until you reference it or in some way create something that has a Z value that it's going to automatically create that 3D model for you. And then we can toggle back and forth between a 3D model and a 2D model. So in this case, when I attach that reference file, I want to make sure I'm sitting in the default model. So a nice way to bounce back and forth from that is that you can have this toolbox called Manage View Groups. And I click here, and you can see how I can switch back and forth between the models. So I'm in the default. So tools attach. Oh, that's nice. I felt the air conditioning come on, I think.
So we want to get rid of that buffer.
Oh, I don't
That
know.
on two, I believe.
Right there?
Oh,
I'm not sure. Okay,
there, yeah.
so what we're looking at now is the alignment and the boundary. That nice clean boundary without all that other stuff in it, we'll say. Then after I bring in that boundary, I need to make that my active terrain. And sometimes it seems like when you attach it, it automatically makes it your active. But let's check to make sure it is. I'm going to hover over the edge. And no, in this case, it did not make it the active terrain. Because you can have multiple files referenced that have terrains in them, but only one can be active at a time. And so I click that active button. And then if this was a 2D file, because I made that active, you know, at this point it's going to automatically create that 3D model for me. So in fact, so at this point, I could use these view controls. I could hold down my right mouse button. It says view control, views, plan, and 3D. So right now I'm sitting in one 2D file, right? But I can actually see both models at the same time. You know, normally when you go into models, you go into one model or the other model, right? But ORD actually has the ability for you to see both. You're sitting in one model and you're only viewing the other model, but there's only one active model at a time. And the way that you tell it what model that you're working in is, see this ribbon up at the top? See how that's darker than the one next to it? So if I use any commands here, it's as if I'm in the 2D model. If I was to do some work over here in the 3D model, I want to use my view controls or something like that and make it act as if it's a 3D file, which it is. I click one time over here. Well, I click two. I click one time, and now see the top, how it's dark? So then it's as if I'm sitting in the 3D model, but I can still see the 2D. And when I'm sitting in the 3D, that's when I could come over here with my view controls again, snap to something. So that you can see that it is in fact 3D. And as we continue to develop this, most everything, when it comes to modeling, most everything that you do, you're doing in 2D. They always say, Bentley people say, like, you do it in 2D, the 3D comes for free. That's the term they always like to say. And that's because you are mostly working in 2D, but the 3D will just automatically appear over there in that 3D view for you. And the reason why you're only seeing a couple lines right now, you're seeing the boundary, which is in 3D. You know, you saw before, I'm not going to do it right now, but I could turn on the contours or the triangles. The reason why you see the alignment in 3D is because I made that terrain my active terrain. And then we'll look at this, we'll see that the alignment's already profiled. And it became my active profile. So let me minimize this window for now. And let's take a look at that existing profile. Okay, we can do this multiple ways. One way would be to go to my selector, click one time on that alignment, and then just kind of hover over it. And you'll get these choices here. That very first icon says Open Profile Model. I click on that, and then I click on the window number that I want to visualize that profile. And then I select within that view. And so that is my existing profile there. And like most everything in ORD, you know, unlike Geopack, try not to refer back to Geopack too many times because this is just different, but it's, you know, that profile is not really there. Everything's visualized, you know, it's just, I can't really go in this case and modify this line. It's, the terrain is overlaid on the existing alignment, and so it's pulling that Z value, it's visualizing that existing profile for me. And one of these profiles will then show up in that 3D view, and that's whatever one is the active profile. And there's only one profile right now, and it's this one. It looks like it automatically become active, but if not, I would click here. I'm going to go ahead and clear it just to show you what I mean, because normally you would have to tell it what profile, especially once you get into your proposed, like maybe you have a couple different alternate, you know, you got a couple different versions of your proposed profile, and you can leave all those profiles in this window, and even though they're in the profile window, they're not going to show up in the model or be used by the model. It's really just whatever one is your active profile. Yeah, so see, there's that 3D view. See how the alignment disappeared? And that's because I cleared it. So right now I don't have an active profile, but the second that I make one active, whether it be that existing or if I design to propose, as part of this session we're not going to cover designing proposed profiles. We'll come back and do that, but just quickly here I'll show you what I mean by that. By the fact that later you'll have a proposed profile. We're going to use these tools under the Geometry tab, and then here where it says Vertical, we're going to use, this is just like a place line tool. Let's see if I can expand that a little bit. I'm just going to throw a line out there, and then I'm going to make that line my active one. Okay, and then if I bring back up that window 3, we should be able to see. I'm not sure why there's a little bit of a hesitation there, but let's see, 3 or 2, I mean. There we go. Guess I just have to be patient, not click so fast. But see how you're seeing that alignment? You can tell that it's, kind of higher in elevation. I drew that, profile line up there. So I made that my active profile, and that's why it's making your alignment be visualized in this 3D view at that new profile view. So, okay, but for this particular session, I just wanted to show you how to create an existing profile. We'll come back, like I said, to the proposed. Let me look at my notes real quick. Yep, that's all I wanted to cover for now. We'll come back to this. We're going to move on to right-of-way lines next within this session. Okay, so any questions about existing profiles? I think later you'll probably have questions about how to annotate the profile once you get it on a sheet and things like that. But as far as an existing profile, as you can see, there's very simple. There's really not much to it, honestly. One thing I had trouble with, this is just maybe just a little hint type thing. A lot of things in ORD require that this little, I don't know if you call it a tool, not a tool tip, but when I hover over something, I get all these choices on my cursor. Sometimes you'll find it takes a while to get used to it. Sometimes you'll be hovering over something and nothing happens. Oftentimes that'll be because maybe on your element selector, if it's set to that plus, like I've noticed that it's either more difficult or impossible to get that to pop up. Just a little hint is that you want that new button to be selected instead, and just click one time, try not to move your cursor, and you'll usually get it. But you're going to notice in the beginning, you're like, where is this thing? It's kind of hard to get it to pop up. If you ever absolutely can't get that to pop up, or just frustrated with it, it's just you're done messing with it. Like I usually leave up my properties all the time. I keep it docked here on the side. In another way that you can get where you don't have to just hover over it and wait for that to pop up is to come over here to properties, and if you right click, you'll get a lot of those same choices. Like there's the open profile window. So that's just another way that you can get to it if you ever have trouble with the pop-up. I did a lot in the beginning, but now it seems like I maybe have the handle on it. You hover over it just right and it pops up, no problem. So, okay, that's it for existing profiles. Next, let's move on to existing right-of-way. So I'm not going to talk so much. I'm going to take a little break on talking for 1 second, just while I copy this file. We've already talked about how you create your own file. I'm just going to do it. Stop talking for a second. Alright, again, our standard file naming convention. Okay, when it comes to right-of-way, as of right now, so what I'm going to be talking about is, as of right now, in District 6, specifically, if somebody's watching back this video, just so you know, I'm talking about District 6, right now, our land acquisition person, like Andy Wetzel, in our case would be our guy here, Um, in the future, Andy, or he's actually going to retire this year, whoever replaces him, will probably take care of all this for you guys. You won't have to do this. But one thing that's different about ORD compared to SS10 is that the right-of-way must be profiled. And I think we talked a little bit about that maybe before the session or something. And that's the reason why, as of right now, one of the reasons why. The other reason is that when Andy develops existing right-of-way, for the purpose of plats and this sort of thing, he uses coordinate geometry, and ORD does not have coordinate geometry. As of today, he's not comfortable using the ORD tools to create existing right-of-way for you yet. But he seems to be willing to learn, but as I said, he's going to retire, so most likely it'll be next year, whenever they get somebody new in there, they learn ORD, that person will probably go ahead and profile the right-of-way for you, and you will not have to do this at this time. But for the next year, you're going to have to, so I'll go ahead and show you the steps on how you go about doing that. So just like everything else, the topo, the terrain, the alignment, we are going to create our own version of right-of-way. And of course, there is a benefit. Just like everything else, it would be, ideally we would not be doing this, and that is, and everybody would agree on this. The reason is because if Andy makes a change to the right-of-way and you have a copy of it, then it's not going to automatically be reflected. So you really need, if you are going to be working with copies, you kind of need to stay in tune with your job, and I would recommend even referencing in their versions, the Land Act versions of these files. Turn the display on and just kind of look through, see if you see anything that's different. Most likely you're going to know about this because if there's like a survey change or something like this, you would have placed a survey request. Like, it's your job. You're going to know if there's an expectation something's going to change. But in any case, keep an eye on that. I'm going to name it design, description, right-of-way, designer version. I don't know why there's seems to be like throughout the day I've noticed there's a little hesitation. Must be in the network or something because all this is cloud-based now, so everything's probably being copied up to the cloud, I assume. Maybe that's why, I'm not sure, but be patient. Okay, I'm going to now open up my version of the right-of-way file. And then just like I did with topo, I'm going to start off by bringing in Andy's version, or the Land Act Plats and Plans version of the right-of-way. All right, so reference, tools attach, and then our Plats and Plans section has their own location, which, Plats and Plans is within the Land Act department there. So I go to Land Act. Wait a minute. I need to go back to it keeps defaulting to that project, not my training folder. Okay. Land Act. And there's Andy's file right there. And I'm pretty certain this is an SS10 file because, as I said, Andy, as of today, is only comfortable with using coordinate geometry and geopack for creating this stuff. So it's probably an SS10, but it doesn't really matter too much, with the exception of, like with what Frank was saying earlier about when copying in SS10 data, sometimes it gets a little funky in your ORD file. So we're not going to copy anything outside that we copied in from SS10 outside of this right-of-way file. We're just going to leave it there. All right, and this is what you're probably used to seeing right here, right? I don't know how you guys are operating right now, but you're probably pointing to Andy's file, I assume. Maybe in some cases copying it into your topo file or something. There's over the years we've handled it differently. So okay, I really just need the lines. I don't need the text. And I'm going to have to do some work to these lines, though, because these lines are just microstation lines. I'm going to need to do several things. I'm going to need to assign a feature definition, which is specific to ORD. In SS10 GeoPack, there was no feature definition. I'm going to complex these elements. I'm going to profile these elements. So this is all something new. In the past, the most that you would have had to have done with Andy's lines, and hopefully he would have done this, we use something called a DDB file. I told myself I won't go back or down the GeoPack line. We could talk about GeoPack all day. I'll try to stay focused on ORD. It was just different. Okay. So I don't really need to copy everything in. In this case, this job's like 5 miles long. For training purposes, we're only going to work on like the first third of the job, I would say. So I think instead of merging it in, I'm just going to select the lines up here in the area that we're going to be doing this for training purposes. I really don't need the text. So, and this is not new to ORD. This is just microstation stuff. I'm sure you know that you can go, once you select everything, you can deselect. You can take something out of the selection set. Well, actually I did it backwards.
It's backwards in ORD.
Oh, is that what it is?
For most of them except color. And if you hold shift, you can do the reverse.
Oh, thanks. I was like, yeah. That was a little confusing. Okay, so hit shift in text.
Maybe it's control.
Control text. Yeah, nice. Took that out of the selection set. Is there anything else that I don't want in the selection set? Maybe cell. I think there's right-of-way markers in this file, but really those exist in the topo file already, so I don't really need those markers. I took out cells, so now all I've got selected is just the right-of-way line. So I'm just going to hold down my right mouse button, hit copy, and here's where I was saying that when you copy something, make sure it's right on top of itself. I'm just going to snap to the end of that line there, snap to the exact same point. So now when I deselect, if I turn that display of right-of-way off, I should have just my existing right-of-way lines, which I do. All right. So now you can see that even though Andy used SS10, that the proper line style did come across. It looks correct, but in ORD, for the model to recognize these lines, those lines need to have a feature definition set to them. So in addition to level, weight, color, actually, when I set my feature definition, it would automatically set up for me the proper level, weight, and color, and line style, and more. So in order to do that, I'm going to go up to my Geometry tab, Standards, and I'm going to bring out my feature definition toolbar. And where to go? You see it somewhere up there?
You try to build the view there, right?
Here, go ahead and pull it down for me, would you? Where the heck's it at?
Try to build a window. View one.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I'm blind. Okay. So this is what the feature definition toolbar looks like. And I can either set that feature definition as I go along, or I could just set my active feature definition right now. And then that way, yeah, there's just two ways of doing it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to turn feature definition on. I'm going to come over here, go to this drop down, and it's a linear element. It's a right-of-way element, and then it's an existing right-of-way line. So I select that. And I've noticed this. Sometimes you have to select this twice. I don't know why. Or actually, I've noticed when you select it, don't select the text. If you select over on the left, where it has that like paint palette,
That's what I did.
yeah, if I select it there, then it'll. So now, see this button on the left? If that is toggled on, any elements that I place in this file will be placed, with that feature definition, right? So if I was to come up here to my place smart line, so you can see that there's that line. If I was to hover over that line, it's a proper level weight, all those attributes. But if I went to my element info, you would see that it also has this additional information. It's going to give that line a specific name, a feature name. It's also going to say this is the feature definition. And if you ever want to change that feature definition, this would be kind of like in MicroStation doing a change attributes. One way of just changing it would be to do it right here. Go to that drop down, and I can change it to something else, a different feature definition.
I don't think it changes the name when you do that.
No?
I don't think so.
Let's see. You're right. Yeah, you're right. That might be the only downside of doing it that way is that it's nice to have logical names to where the names are what it is. Like it's when you initially, if you're not going to rename your elements yourself, which that'd take a lot of time and effort, and you're just going to go with the default. Yeah, that's maybe the downside of doing it that way. Like notice if I was to come over here, and if I was to change my active to something else, and then I go to place that line, and I do the element info, it's probably going to use some sort of logical name by default. Yeah, see where it says access control fence right there? So that's what Brad was saying. So if you do change that feature definition that way, yeah, you may want to change the name of it also, just so it's not necessary, but just for keeping track of things in the future, it might be helpful for you for the name to be more intuitive, I guess. Okay, so let's take in this case, Andy drew the lines. We're not going to redraw the right. I could draw on top of his lines if I wanted to, but he has the lines drawn. I'm just going to use his lines, and I'm going to apply the feature definition to it. So I'm going to select
Definition back to right-of-way on access control.
Yeah, John was saying that I changed the active to access control fence, so I'm going to go back to existing right-of-way. And so now I can just set the feature, because right now these lines do not have a feature definition. If you go to the standards pull down, it says set feature definition. And one of my choices here is to just use the active. Here, this is where I was saying that you can set it in the active, or if I didn't have the active set, as I'm using this tool, I could have used the drop down right here and pointed to it that way as well. I don't know. I tend to just use this. Personally, I usually leave the active, the feature definition toolbar docked. And then I just say use active on most everything, but again, that's kind of just a preference. And I've selected all of Andy's lines. It says there's 36 elements. I'm going to data point to accept them. And so now those regular microstation lines are now, I guess, featureized, you might say. They have a feature definition. And I could leave it at that. I wouldn't necessarily have to complex these lines together. But I guess personally, I think it's a lot easier to do that. And the reason is because, again, this is new to ORD. You need to profile every one of those lines. So it's a whole lot easier if it's just one line, right? So like for this run right here, I'll just complex that together. So I use this complex geometry tool. And again, as long as my active is still set to existing right-of-way, that feature definition that's set to the complexed element will also be existing right-of-way. And I like to use the automatic, where if you can, sometimes it's not selecting everything, it doesn't work, but I like to use automatic if possible. Then what you do is you just start at one end. Make sure that you can see that arrow. This is similar to when we complex the alignment. Okay, and then I like to make sure I'm zoomed out far enough so I make sure I grabbed everything. It's highlighted. If something's not highlighted, that usually means there's a gap in between, so you want to fix the gap, or you may have to increase your maximum gap spacing, possibly.
There's a tool that fixes all that, gaps, overlaps, and all that.
What's that?
Design file cleanup, the tool.
Oh, yeah.
And it'll find all your gaps throughout everything and all your overlaps.
Nice. Let me get through this, and then if you could, show me where that's at, because I don't think I knew that existed.
It's pretty helpful.
Okay, so I accepted it. So now I hover over it. It's one element. And this is really just like, the alignment, to where I need, in order to profile that line, and I want that profile to be the same as the surface. The reason, you'll see this later, it's gonna, on your cross-section sheets, it's gonna label the existing right-of-way in the way that it knows, like, where to place that, it might be a cell, is gonna be based on the profile of this right-of-way line. It's gonna know how to set that annotation, because wherever the cross-section intersects with that right-of-way line, and also, at an X, Y, and Z, wherever it is in space, in the Z value also is where it's going to place that labeling. That's a whole reason for doing, what we're doing here. So next I'm going to open up this line as a profile. Oh, but it's not going to work, and of course, it opened it up as a profile, but why don't I see the profile? And that's because I've not referenced. Yeah. Yep. And so, see, this kind of goes back to why I started off this thing saying, okay, why did I create my own train? Because I like to bring in that nice, clean boundary. And I do that over and over, it seems. Oh, shoot. Okay, well, maybe I should have gone farther with what I was picking up. Again, you know what? It's a real life job. If this was a Bentley Fundamentals, everything's going to be perfect, right? This is real life right here. So just to give you a quick background on this job, this portion, this job was 5 miles long. This section was realigned in 2014. And so there's new full depth pavement. The rest of it is old pavement. And so when you get assigned a job, you'll be told this is going to be what, a standard overlay project with 2 1/4 surface, or it's going to be a design overlay. And so you're going to most likely have like a total of 3 3/4 inch overlay. So what I'm getting at is that we really don't need cross sections on this project for this section, because it's just going to be a mill and fill of 1 1/2 inch. So now I guess I'm getting away from CAD stuff, more design talk, I suppose. But that's the whole reason why surveys only provided a DTM for not the whole job, but just going south. So we'll go ahead and profile just this little bit here. I may come back later and kind of add on to that. But it's the same process, and that's really the only point of this training, is to just show you what the process is. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and complex this line. Let's see, I might as well only complex what's within the limit. And I'm going to complex on the other side too. Now I'll go back and open up that right-of-way line as a profile. And then here you say, oh, what's up? Why am I not seeing it? Yeah, we don't have it. We need that terrain to be the active terrain, not just referenced in, but it has to be the active terrain. So I'm going to hover over the boundary, make it active, and then just immediately that profile should show up because it's the active terrain. And then I also want to make that my active profile. And I'm going to do the same for the other line, just to show you different ways of bringing up a profile view. I hovered over it, which is a nice way. Another way that you can do it is in the geometry tab. Let's see. I would like for these icons to be larger. Why are they small? You probably can't see those back there very well. But in the geometry tab under vertical, I can click profile, and then it says locate the plan element, and then locate a view. Could have done it that way. Yeah, so that's just multiple ways that you can open up a profile window. Most of the time you'll probably just hover over, it's just faster. So like I said, sometimes it's hard to get that heads up display to pop up on you, and you're like, screw this, and you go over and just grab the tool itself. Okay, so those are profiled now, so they should show up in my 3D view, right? So this is really no different than the alignment like we talked about earlier. Let's look at our models. Because we referenced in that terrain, we made it our active terrain, we now have a 3D model. So I've got a choice. I can either go directly into that 3D model, or I can stay in this 2D model, but be able to also view inside of that 3D model at the same time. And if I want that, I go to this multi-model view. Or they've got this quick little way of doing it, and that's just hold down your right mouse button, go to View, Plan 3D, Release. And there it is. There's one of my lines, so I must not have made the other one the active profile. I guess I haven't done that yet. So let's hover over that line. Again, see how it's not doing anything right away? It's kind of annoying sometimes. I select it, be patient, hopefully it pops up. Again, like I said, if it ever does not pop up like that, just go over here and right click over here for open profile model. Just another way of doing the exact same thing. All right, so let's see if that really does work. Okay, so you've got the terrain, you got the right-of-way line. It's not showing up in your 3D model. So I go to my element selector, I hover over the line, and I click on active profile, and then immediately there it is. And then you're going to see, like, later in these, throughout these sessions, that you're going to be cutting cross sections in 3D, right? And you're going to see that that existing right-of-way line is going to project through that boundary, and that's the reason why the existing right-of-way is going to show up in your model. It's going to show up in on your cross-section sheets and all that sort of thing. And so I think that's it for profiling right-of-way lines, or bringing in SS10 or even ORD that's not profiled, right-of-way lines from the Land Act folder. Featurizing it, I set my feature definition, I complexed it, I made it my active profile, and that's it. That's like all the steps. So, what do you guys make of that, or what do you guys have to say? So I take a break for a second.
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud. I mean, does it make sense? You're hearing a lot of information. Give me just a little feedback. I feel like I'm talking a lot. You're not really doing it. Everything I'm saying, does it seem to kind of make sense? And, yeah, good. So you kind of feel like that you could go back to your desk and play back maybe this video and be able to recreate what we just did? 100% cool. All right. Well, if that's the case, it's 11 o'clock, so it's probably a good time to end this session. So I think we'll end it here, take a 10-minute break, and we'll finish up with our last session afterwards.
No, it's recording.
It is? Oh, okay, good. Well, that set the limits. I don't think I hit the No! Oh, good.
Because you got
thank
there somewhere.
Thank goodness. Yeah, so go ahead and stop it then.
There.
Yeah.